Ang Talino. Muling pinabili ni Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. Muling pinabili ni Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. sa Makati City sa kanyang paglahok sa fireside chat na High-Level Philippines Dynamic Growth Story sa ASEAN Editors sa kanyang paglahok sa fireside chat na Tapping the Philippines Dynamic Growth Story sa ASEAN Editors and Economic Competitive Leaders Forum. Inilatag ng Pangulo ang malakas na economic growth ng Pilipinas, mas pinadaling investment policies, mas infrastructure expansion, at mas globally competitive partnerships sa loob ng ASEAN. Tinalakay ng mga senior policymakers, business leaders, and economic growth ng Pilipinas. Ipinakita ng Pangulo ang plano mas paano maging mas future-ready ang Pilipinas sa gitna ng global competition expansion
Ladies
at
and
strategic
gentlemen, it is my
partnerships
honor
sa
to
loob
welcome
ng
the man of the
ASEAN.
hour, President
Sa
of the
harap ng
Republic
mga
of the
senior
Philippines, His
policymakers,
Excellency
business
Ferdinand
leaders, and media
Romualdez Marcos
executives,
Jr.
ipinakita ng Pangulo ang plano kung paano magiging mas future-ready ang Pilipinas sa gitna ng global competition.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to welcome the man of the hour, President of the
Mr.
Republic
President,
of the Philippines,
how are you feeling
His
today?
Excellency
much better than I was
Ferdinand
maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Romualdez Marcos
We are
Jr.
glad that you're in good health, and thank you so much for spending time with us and talking about the Philippine dynamic growth story.
Well, it is definitely very exciting time for the Philippines in many senses because we have really approached the entire system of governance, especially as it pertains to the economy, by making serious structural changes
Mr. President,
in the way that we
how
do
are you
business.
feeling
And,
today?
Of course, like any large change a couple of weeks ago that is being attempted.
We are
it's not
glad
an
that
easy
you're
thing
in
to do.
good health,
The bureaucracy
and
is a
thank you
very-
so much for spending time with
characterize it
us
as being akin
and talking
to
about
one
the Philippine
of, these, very large
dynamic
tankers
growth story.
where you turn the wheel, and it takes 10 kilometers for it to actually start moving. And my experience has been, in many senses, government bureaucracy is very much like that. Approach the entire system of governance, especially as it pertains to the economy, by making serious structural changes.
And so that is part
in
of
the way that
structural
we do
changes that we're
business.
talking about.
And
The structural changes that we are trying to make in terms of the way government and
large
works,
change
but also
that,
in
can
being
be-
more,
that is
being
being
able to
attempted.
respond more quickly.
It
And
is
to that
not
wheel,
an
when we
easy
turn the
thing
wheel,
to do.
let's just say we have
The
decided to change
bureaucracy
direction or
is
take
a
on a new
very,
policy.
you know,
How to be able to adjust much more quickly than you're
I
able to
characterize
adjust
it
now.
as being
So
akin
that's
to
the-
one
it's a very
of,
interesting problem.
these,
It's a difficult
very
problem,
large
but it's an important
tankers
thing that we have
where
to do.
you
And
turn
I
the
think
wheel,
we are beginning to be
and
met
it
with some
takes
success.
what
And,
10
Mr.
kilometers
President,
for
when
it
you're
to actually start
turning
moving.
that wheel,
And
some say
my
it's
experience
power
has
steering.
been, a
It's
government
a
bureaucracy
perspiration
is very
steering.
much
Are we
like
now
that.
moving more towards
And
power
so,
steering?
I should hope
Faster
so.
reforms?
I hope so. I think
Much of the
that is
frustration
certainly one of the
comes from
aims of what we are
impatience.
trying to do.
Can we not move
we
this faster?
have
Can
a
we
very
not move
we
this-
view
can we not
the
get this done
global
much more
economy
quickly?
in very
And
many
so
ways.
that is
in
part of
there is a great deal of
structural changes
volatility
that we're
as we
talking
have
about.
seen in the past
The structural
years.
changes that
And
we are
in fact,
trying to
it-
make
it
in
was,
terms of the way
we had
government
hoped
and
that after COVID
works,
that things
but
would come
also
down and that we would set
in
directions
being
and we would
more,
slowly
being
just
able to
move in those
respond
directions, or
more
not so
quickly.
slowly, quickly
And
move
to
down
that wheel
the
road
road
that
that
we
we
have
have
set
set
for
for
ourselves.
ourselves.
Let's just say
However,
we have
the
decided
shocks
to
have come
change
in and
direction
unexpected,
or take on a new
not
policy.
only in the
How
economic
to be able
world, but
to
also in the
adjust
political
much
world, the
more quickly
geopolitical
than we are
world.
able to adjust
And
now.
I remember
So that's,
very early on
that's the-
in the administration,
it's a very
I would always
interesting
describe
problem.
the
It's a difficult
geopolitical
problem,
situation
but it's an
in
important
Philippines,
thing
in Southeast
that we
Asia,
have
in the
to
South
do,
China Sea,
and
as
I
the most
think we are
complicated
beginning to be met with
geopolitical situation
And,
in the world.
Mr. President,
Boy,
when
was I
you're
wrong. That
turning
changed very,
that
very quickly.
wheel,
And so
some
now
say
we are
it's
surrounded by
power
these geopolitical
steering.
upheavals. And so
It's
there is
a perspiration steering. Are we now moving more towards power steering?
And to be
faster
able to say
reforms?
that whatever
I hope
shocks
so.
we should
I
learn
think
from our
that
COVID
is
experiences.
certainly one
We should
of the
also learn
aims
from the
of what we are
experiences that
trying
we
to do.
are now presently going through.
We
To be
have
able
a
to say
very-
that we are more
we
robust,
view
and no matter what
the,
happens, that we are able to
global
be resilient, and we are
economy,
able to adjust.
in
And
very
that
many
is
ways.
that is what we are trying to do. So there is an element of stability and robustness.
And in fact,
however,
it was
as I have just explained, the world has
after COVID
brought upon us many
things
changes.
would calm
So there's
down
also
and
need
that
to
we
be
would
agile.
set
So that is
directions
the
and we
balance
would
that we have to
slowly just
find.
move
So,
in
Mr.
those
President,
directions,
how
or
are you
not so
providing
slowly,
this
quickly move
stability
down
for
that road
the Philippine
that we have
economy?
set for ourselves.
So the Philippine economy,
However,
what we have tried to
the
do, of
shocks
course,
have
is
come
that,
in, and
in my view,
unexpected,
the important, not
most
only in
important,
the
most important
economic
elements of that
political
world,
stability,
but
of course,
also
is
in the
at the very
political
heart of it.
world, the
But more than that
geopolitical
is,
world.
are they,
And
we have to change the ways that we do business. Now, very early on in the administration, And
I would always
certainly,
describe
it is very much the case.
the geopolitical
But,
situation
we in the Philippines have
in
really
Philippines, in Southeast Asia, in the
dependent
South China
on
Sea,
traditional
as the
or
most
established
complicated
investors, and
geopolitical
that has had to
situation
change.
in the world.
And the change is in that.
Boy,
is that
was I
we- is
wrong.
that we then go to
That changed
first we
very,
do
very
business
quickly
in a different way.
And
in the world today.
so
must the
now
Philippines,
we are
and that's the
surrounded
changes
by
that we
these
are trying to do.
geopolitical
Secondly,
upheavals.
we need to go out into the world.
So
a great deal
there
more.
is, there
For
is
example, what
one of the
I described
main
it as that we have to
things that we are
engage
striving for
non-traditional
is to
suppliers,
provide
non-traditional
stability,
investors, and to be
part of the
able to
Philippine
say
economy.
that whatever
And when I say
shocks,
non-traditional,
we should
what I
learn
mean
from
by
our-
non-traditional
from
is
our
non-traditional
COVID experiences.
to the Philippines.
We should
The
also learn
countries that we
from
have not really traded
experiences
with before
that we are now
areas,
presently
regions that we have
going
not
through.
really engaged before.
To be able to say
sometimes
that
the
we
reason
are
that we
more
haven't done that is
robust,
simply because of
and no matter what
physical
happens,
distance.
that we are now talking a great deal more
be
to the EU,
resilient,
and we are able
as a trading
adjust.
bloc.
And also we are doing a lot bilaterally with the different countries that are EU members. Latin America also presents a great opportunity.
There is an element
to engage as well,
stability,
considering that there is such great
and
commonality
robustness.
between the
And
Philippines and
however,
Latin American countries.
as
I
we
often
have
describe the
as I
Philippines
have
as the
just
only Latin
explained,
country
the world
in
has
Asia. And I think that is to our
brought us
benefit,
many
and we
changes.
should take advantage of that.
So
and we
there's
should build
also
on that.
need to be
So
agile.
there are
That is the
Canada is now
balance
become
that
one
we
of
have
our strongest
to
partners.
find.
So, Mr.
France
President,
will be
how
one
are
of
you
our strongest partners, I
providing
believe. So
this
these are
stability
non-traditional for the Philippines in terms of
Philippine
trade.
economy?
And that
For the
we have to
Philippine
engage
economy,
that.
what
And that
we
even
have tried to do,
goes
of
over
course,
as
is
well
that
into the
in
question
my
of
view,
stability.
and
when we talk about
important,
commerce,
the
trade,
most one of the
what
most
the
important
businessmen, what
elements of
investors
that,
are looking for
political
is
stability, of course, is
and
at
vision.
the very heart of
You
it.
need stability,
But more than
and you
that
have to
is,
have a vision, you
are
have to have a plan, you have to have a goal.
we have to change
and that
the
can be
ways
that
that
is
we do
recognizable
business. Now,
to
we
prospective
all-
businesses.
we have been
That they say,
talking
okay,
about
this is
the
what the
global
Philippines wants to
economy
do,
for a very long time
and
now.
these are what these are the things that the Philippines is doing to try to
it is
achieve
very
that
much the
goal.
case.
We should be part of that, and that is
we
the
in
kind
the Philippines
of that is the way that we are trying to make the Philippines that we are making it is succeeding. That we are making the Philippines a more investor-friendly and more investor-attractive country.
You talk about investor-friendly, you talk about political and economic stability.
And
When I talk
and
to
the
foreign
changes
investors,
is
Mr.
in that
President,
is that
they're
we do
always
is that
telling
we
me
then
about the
go
ease
to
of doing business.
first, we
The
do
number,
business
not
in a different
dozens,
way
but the
in the world
hundreds of
today.
signatures
So
that
must
you
the
need
Philippines,
to be
and that's
able
the
to
those are
get,
the changes that we're trying
let's
to do.
say, things
Secondly,
done, right?
we
They say it's
need
about
to
200 to
go
300
out into the
signatures,
world
while in
a great
Singapore,
deal
it
more.
only takes 1 to 2
For
days
example,
to sign up.
what
I lived in Singapore for many years.
describe
And then in
it as that
Thailand,
we
it
have
takes
to
about 2 months.
engage
In Vietnam, how can we
non-traditional
align
suppliers,
the ease of doing business with our ASEAN neighbors?
investors,
Just a touch
smaller to be part of the
maybe in that
Philippine
sense there's
economy.
but of course
And
that
when I
is a
say
perfectly
non-traditional,
valid statement.
what I
It's a
mean
perfectly
by
valid
non-traditional
insight.
is
And it really, the
non-traditional to
bureaucracy,
the
that's
Philippines.
why I mentioned the bureaucracy
The
earlier.
countries that we have not really traded with before,
shall we say, roadblocks to
areas,
quicker,
regions that we have not really engaged
processing
before.
and simple
And
things.
sometimes the reason that we haven't done that is simply because of
getting a new
physical
copy
distance
of your birth certificate.
We are
And we went through the
now
process of saying, how does it go
talking
and
a
how long
great
does
deal
it take?
more to the
And it
EU,
takes a month, maybe.
but
a month and a half. Why would it take a month and a half?
as a trading
Because
bloc.
again,
But also we are doing a lot bilaterally with the different countries that are EU members. Latin America also presents a great opportunity. And we are trying to engage as well, and considering minimizing now
great
the necessary contact between the Philippines and the Latin American countries
that they do.
And we are relying very much
Philippines
on
as the
the
only
new
Latin
technologies
country in
because we are
in
7,000, and I think that is
that
is
and
to
it
our
is
benefit.
too much to ask
And
for
we
somebody
should
who's
take
living on a
advantage of that,
relatively
and we should
isolated
build
island.
on that.
To find
So
a way
there
to
are
grow.
the regional
Canada
centers
is now
go to the government
one of
office
our
there and get the
strongest
documents that they have.
partners.
But we have
France
this advantage.
we have
will
this
be
technology.
one of our
We have this.
strongest
This is
partners,
for
I
the
believe.
Philippines.
So
For a country like the
these
Philippines,
are
is a very large
non-traditional
archipelago.
for the Philippines in terms of trade.
Most islands in the world.
That we have to engage that.
For
And
us,
that even
and we are
goes over as well into the question of stability.
those technologies. And
And
we now have
when
what
we
we call
talk
the Eagle
about commerce,
which
trade,
is an application
what
which
the
which
businessmen,
allows you
what
over the
investors
internet
are looking
to
for
get in
is
touch
stability
with different government
and
agencies,
vision.
and in that way, do your
You need
business over
stability,
online.
so that and you have to have a vision. You have to have a plan. You have to have a goal,
our IDs,
and that can be that is recognizable to prospective businesses. That they say, okay, this is what the Philippines
that you
wants
can
to
get
do.
immediately.
And these are what these are the things that the Philippines is doing to try to achieve that goal. A physical
We should be
ID.
part of that.
And that is the kind of
eventually change.
that is the way that we are trying to make the Philippines, that we are making it, but that we are making the Philippines a more investor-friendly and more investor-easier to adapt to that.
You talk about investor friendly.
So these are the kinds of things that we are trying to do.
Political and economic stability. When I talk to foreign investors, Mr. President, they're always telling me about the ease of doing business. The number, not dozens, but the hundreds of signatures that you need to be able
and then with a wonderful
to
traffic,
get,
that takes another hour.
let's
it is
say,
across town to get another signature,
things done,
and to get another signature,
right?
and another
They say it's
signature.
about
For example,
200 to 300
to register a new
signatures,
corporation.
while in
We look it
Singapore,
up.
it only
And
takes
the-
1 to 2
the number of
days to
signatures
sign
forms
up.
that you have to
I
fill out
lived in Singapore for
are
many
just,
years, and then in
crazy.
Thailand, it takes
Our
about
model
2
is Singapore.
months.
Because
In
in Singapore,
Vietnam,
all you have-
how
yeah, I
can
think
we
it's 2 or 3
align
documents that you have to
the
fill
ease
out.
of doing
And they're all one
business with our
office next to the
ASEAN
other.
neighbors?
And that's just Vietnam. That's why they become so successful. Vietnam, I know businessmen who open businesses in
But of
Vietnam.
course,
from the
that is a
Philippines.
perfectly
Filipinos who
valid
come to Vietnam and they say, you know,
statement. That's a perfectly
we had just
valid
dinner with the
insight.
minister, and the
it
next day
really,
we
the
woke up, all the papers were there, we just had to sign, we signed them, we came home, finished. And that's what we are
has
aspiring to
been
do.
one
And that's
of
what-
the main,
but there is much to unravel.
shall
And
we
there's
say,
much to undo.
roadblocks to
Much of the problem
quicker,
comes from, shall we say, a tendency by our legislators
things like
to
we were just
have
we were
knee-jerk
debating
reactions
the other
to
day.
things. So when a problem arises,
getting a
they
new,
immediately say, okay,
getting a
we'll put
copy
another
of your birth
level
certificate.
of tests, of checks
we
and balances.
went through the process
And
and
sometimes
say, how
the
does
checks
it
and
go and
balances
how
are
long does
lying
it
on top
take?
of one another.
And it
And they
takes
are
a month,
often,
maybe.
in fact, contradictory.
A month and a half. Why
And
would
that
it
is
take a month
and
and
now
a half?
the bureaucrat,
Because,
the civil
again,
servant,
you have to
is
go through
hesitant
this entire
to
process,
actually
which is
just
very
go
slow.
and just do it and get it done.
And,
Because
it's
if you
still
really look
done
hard
by
enough,
hand,
you will
the
find that they
files
violated
are
something
still,
somewhere, some little
in-
rule
in-
that
in,
nobody really pays any
handwritten
attention to,
form.
that has no use
And so
whatsoever,
that's why
that has
we
never
are
been
trying
involved, but they are
to,
worried.
we are
And so this
trying
kind
to-
of
to-
attitude, this
to-
kind of
to fix
atmosphere
that.
needs to change.
And
The best way is
we
the
are
quickest way, and the most
minimizing
efficient
now
way. It is not the way that
necessary
will avoid any trouble because we
between
will not,
the citizen
that is not
and
what government is about. We're not about, we're not here to find
that
fault
they
in
do.
If,
And we
for example,
are
you make a mistake,
relying very
I'm not
much
going to
on the
file an
new
administrative case
technologies
against
on
you.
the
I'm going to go
internet.
there and help you and say why
Because
this is what was the problem and what can we do to make it better.
7,000+
And that's what
And
we are
it
trying to
is
do.
too
with
much to
government.
ask for
But and I
somebody
think
who
in
is
the 10
living on a
kilometers that we're
relatively
waiting, maybe we're about
isolated
kilometer 8 now. So we're
find a
moving,
way
but
to
it's
go
coming along,
to
but much,
the
much, much
regional
more slowly than
center,
we'd like
go
to
to
do.
the government office there and get the documents.
We would like
that
it
they
much
have.
faster to attract
But we have this
foreign
advantage. We
investors
have
in the
this
country.
technology.
Is this red tape,
We
Mr.
have this.
President, and this bureaucracy
For
also
the
the cause
Philippines,
of
for a
why
country
we
like
have
the
fallen
Philippines, which, as I said,
even below Vietnam
is an
in terms of
a very large
attracting
archipelago.
FDIs? In 2024 alone, there was $230 billion worth of investment in ASEAN. And in the Philippines, we just attracted $10 billion. Is it because of the red tape? Is it the bureaucracy? Because when there's a bureaucracy and things are not digitalized, right? Mr. President, things fall through the cracks. It's all about corruption.
We now have what we call the Eagle app.
We have developed a very strange system
which
in the Philippines where
allows
you have
you
fixers
over the internet
where
to
instead of
get
waiting
in
for 2
touch
to 3
with
hours
different
online,
government
inline,
agencies.
and going from
And in
one
that
office to
way,
another and
do your
wasting 3 days of your
business
life
online.
trying to get this simple permit to open a business or some such thing.
We are
They have somebody who will
for
sign up to you and say,
example,
you give me X
personal
amount and I'll fix it.
identification, our
And then it comes
IDs
with a bureaucrat and with a civil servant. They say, okay, they'll go there and they say, come on, you rush this one. They rush it, they pay their money, they split the money between the fixer and the guy on the desk.
And that's
And that's what
something
we
that you
want to
can get
completely
immediately
remove.
just
And
by filling
again,
out the form.
digitalization is going
And
to
the
be the key
remaining
for us because
30%
there is no, we are trying to
those
remove in these
people who
processes,
still
we are trying to
insist
remove
on
as much
having a
discretion
physical
on
ID.
the civil servant as possible.
That's
For two reasons. Number one, of course it will make things quicker, it will make things
eventually
easier.
change.
Number two,
It's a
it will remove
generational
that
thing.
fear
It is.
from civil servants
you
that they
still pull
had
your
made a
wallet
mistake,
out and
an
want to
honest
show your
mistake.
ID.
And so
But,
they're no
now
longer as
that-
hesitant
but-
because we didn't say yes or no at any point. We just processed a piece of paper and we did exactly as the rules say.
finding it much
physical
easier
contact,
to
no
adapt
person-to-person
to that
contact at all.
and prefer
And people will
so
fill out the
these are
form
the
or
kinds
fill out
of
the forms
things that we are
necessary.
trying to do.
We minimize as
On
well
the
those
ease of
forms.
doing business,
And they will
again,
get
it's the
it
bureaucracy
is what they
that
want, a
gets in the
business
way.
permit, a
And
license,
the
whatever it is that they need from
necessity
government.
for,
And it
having
needn't
all these
be a
forms.
hard copy, a piece of
You know,
paper.
you wait
It can
in
be
line for 2
in the
hours,
computer.
3
If they choose to, they can
hours.
print
These
out
are
or they
days
can keep it
gone.
on their phone and
You
just,
wait for 2,
as many
3
people have been
hours,
doing already.
you get one
Just present it
signature,
wherever it's
and you
needed.
say
So, Mr.
thank you.
President, can we
And they
expect
say,
a
okay,
full
now you have to
digitalization
go
of government
to the other
services
office, which is
by the end of
across
your term?
town, full digitalization,
yes.
and then with our
Certain
wonderful
agencies,
traffic,
certainly.
we have prioritized, especially in the health sector,
It is a cross-town to get
that has been the number one priority, because that has been, what happens is that when you ask for assistance from government, the assistance is forthcoming, but the process takes so long that it becomes, and the number of signatures or it just didn't bother anymore, or sometimes just didn't bother going anymore, and just got sick and tried to get well at home.
Our model is Singapore.
That's a tragedy. So health systems are
all you have,
the government functions, all of these things like simple permits, and they're all IDs, renewing driver's licenses,
Vietnam, same thing.
and even
that's why they become so
for the big
successful.
corporations.
Vietnam, I know businessmen who open businesses in Vietnam
from the Philippines
enter into a contract who have gone to Vietnam, and they say,
or with another
we had just dinner with the minister,
all of these things
and the next day we woke up, all the papers were there, we just had to sign,
back to the
we
ease of
signed
doing
them, we
business
came
and
home.
make it easier for
That's
people to
what we
come.
are aspiring
And
to
should
do.
they decide to invest in the Philippines, but there is much to unravel. Now, the other part of the answer to your question,
the problem
why
comes
in terms of FDI we have fallen behind, is also because one of the other element of this that I said was vision.
by our
We haven't
legislators
really given
to
a roadmap to our
have
prospective
knee-jerk
investors
reactions
about what
to
the
things.
Philippines wants to
So
do.
when
Where are the areas? Do you want to go into electric vehicle manufacturing? Do you want to go to mining? Do you want to go into batteries? Do you want to what is it that the Philippines is going to spend money on?
And
Where is the
sometimes
public
the
expenditure
checks and
going, and
balances
why
are
there?
lying on
And
top
once
one
you are
another.
making that clear
And they
to
are
investors,
often,
there will be investors who
in
say we
fact,
should be part of that.
contradictory.
We'll make money doing
And
that.
that is
what,
and
now hopefully with
the
the ease of doing
bureaucrat,
business,
then
the
civil servant
that will make us more attractive
is hesitant
to all
to
our different
actually
partners
just go and just
trade
do it and
partners
get
around
it
the world.
done.
I think,
Because
Mr. President, for many
if you
investors
really
who are also
look
here in
hard
this room,
enough,
what they really want
you
is
will
the
find that they have
sustainability of
violated
policies
something
from one
somewhere,
administration
some little
to
rule
another,
that
because there is no
nobody really pays
consistency.
any attention to, that has
one
no
administration
use
imposes
whatsoever,
this type
that
of
has
policies,
never
one
been
administration,
involved,
and you have done a
but
lot,
they
Mr.
are
President,
worried.
in terms of
And so this
green
kind
lanes,
of
the Create More
attitude, this
Act,
kind of
atmosphere
needs
you've
to
done
change.
a lot.
The best
to be able
way is the
to
quickest
make
way and the most
foreign
efficient
investors
way.
come into the country.
It is not the way
And
that will
basically 2
avoid
years
any
left,
problem.
so it is
because
important
we will
that the
not-
next administration follows what you've already
That's not
started.
what government is
why
about.
we have
We're
to
not
be very,
about-
very,
we're not here to find
that people have to
fault.
understand
If,
very, very well.
For example, you make
what
a mistake,
it is that we are trying to do
I'm
and
not
what the
going
benefits
to
of what we are
file
trying
an
to do. We've entered
administrative
now into
case
an entirely
against you.
different
I'm
arena.
going to go there and
But
help you
the
and say
political
why
stability
this
is certainly something that is very, very
and what
important.
can we do to make it better?
And maybe that's now,
what
but
we
of
are
course in our
trying
history,
to do.
there has
with
been an
government.
element of
And I think in the 10 kilometers that we're waiting, maybe we're about
you're in a little town,
we're moving,
running to be mayor,
it's
and you're campaigning against
but
the
much,
incumbent or
much
whoever,
more
the incumbent,
slowly than we would like.
and you're criticizing the incumbent and saying they don't know what they're doing.
We would like it much faster to
And they win.
attract
And therefore,
new,
by necessity,
foreign
then they have
investors
to say
into the country.
everything my
Is this red
opponent did
tape,
was wrong.
Mr. President,
So
in this
those, all their
bureaucracy
projects
also
stop.
the
Stop.
cause
I have a better
of why
idea.
we
I have a
have
better.
fallen,
It's halfway done. The
even
school room is
below
halfway done. All you have to do
in
is put a
terms
roof
of
on it. Why don't you just do that? Then
FDIs.
you school
In
now.
2024
But no,
alone,
that's
there
and
was
that has filtered up
$230
to
billion
even the national,
worth
at the
of
national
investments in
level.
ASEAN. And in the
whoever went
Philippines,
before
we
me,
just
who I
attracted
opposed,
$10
and they
billion.
only have presidents only
Is it
get one
because of the
term.
red
So
tape?
you will
Is it the
always be opposing the
bureaucracy?
incumbent.
Because when there's
So
a
you have
bureaucracy
to show
and
that
things are not
everything that this person did in the
digitalized,
past
right?
was
Mr. President,
was wrong. And that
things
you
fall
criticize.
through the cracks.
The wonderful thing about being in the
it's all about
opposition is you don't
corruption.
actually have to get anything to work.
There's that
All you have to
too.
do is
That-
criticize.
that
All you have to do is
doesn't help.
pull
We have
your opponent down. And that's the problem
a
that we
very
face.
strange
We have to
system
really
in the Philippines where
educate
you have
people
fixers.
into what we are trying to do. I'm not
Yes.
here
Where
to,
instead of
I'm not
waiting for
president,
2 to 3
I don't know,
hours
to show off or
online,
whatever, to
inline,
help
and
certain
going
parts
from
of the
one
economy
office to
or
another
friends
and
or
wasting
relatives.
3 days
That's
of
not
your
what I'm here
life
for. I'm here to
trying
do
to
these
get
structural
this simple
changes so that the
permit,
Philippines
to
becomes
open a
more
business
in
or
more
some
investment
such
friendly.
we
We are
have
starting
somebody
to
who
feel the
sidled up
effects
to
of
you
that.
and say, you know, you give me
beneficial
X
effects of
amount
that.
and I'll fix
And
it.
Then
And
you
they're
are
in
able to
cahoots
say,
with the
do
bureaucrat,
you want
with
to
the
stop
civil
those
servant.
beneficial
They say,
things?
okay, then
Because
they'll go there and they say, come
we
on,
do
you
not
rush
elect
this
a
one.
like-minded
They rush it.
president.
They pay their money, they split the money
all of these
between the
will just
fixer
go by
and
the
the
wayside.
guy at
Now,
the-
one of the things we have tried to do
And that's
to
what
make
we want to
make that
completely
those systems more
remove.
robust
And
is to
again,
make them as widespread as possible.
digitalization
Number
is
one.
going to be the key
then I'm
for
talking
us
about things like
because
education,
there is
healthcare,
we are
social
trying to
benefits.
remove in
Make
these
it so
processes,
widespread that
we
people
are trying
immediately
to
feel the
remove
benefits,
as much
and therefore
discretion
they will refuse to
on
allow
the
any future leader to stop those beneficial effects. For two reasons. Number one, however, when it comes to the economy, that is much more difficult. Because how many economists are there? There's less than 0.01% of the populace are actual economists who look at numbers, who look at the inflation rate, who look at the core inflation, the inflation coming from food products, inflation coming from fuel, and try to analyze GDP growth, the ratio between paper and the exact debt and the GDP. All of these things. Who looks at that? No one. Rules say, very few people, maybe us, people in this room. Physical contact, those are the people that look at. So it's harder to explain. And the only way really will, shall we say, fill out the form or fill out your policies is to make people feel minimize as well those forms. And that is the short day of changing the electoral system. But I think those of you who live here in the Philippines have seen the difficulties that arise when the constitution is being questioned and there are suggestions to amend the constitution. A piece of paper. It can be these are the difficulties in the computer. But as long as we are able to show that these policies and these measures that we have undertaken are of benefit, just present it, then people will say, well,
so, Mr. President, can we expect the full digitalization of government services by the end of your term?
And full digitalization, yes. You can do that. Certain agencies that we try to do this, will prioritize, especially and that's much more difficult to change. So some of these policies are enshrined. Create more, because that mentioned, create more. Is the amendment that we have is that when you ask for assistance from government, the assistance is forthcoming, which was to provide incentives for investors. On the plus side, incentives in actual tax breaks and things like that. And the person and sanctions for people who do not follow the rules. And we have actually enlarged it. Or sometimes just didn't bother. There's now come to be called a create because there are now more incentives because there are industries that didn't exist and but that's a tragedy. Now are very very attractive, and I think everyone understands this. The government functions, all of these things, but then there's also permits, which is a traditional industry in the Philippines. Renewing driver's licenses. That will provide a better. But it's a mix actually of incentives and also the other element again is the forms that are required to put up a corporation, also to circumscribe certain areas where, like you say, there's a green lane with the government, get around or with another commercial entity. All of these specify certain areas we look to digitalization and we make it easier for investors to go into those areas. Right back to the ease of doing business and make it easier for mining to come. And should they decide, many investors, actually I made some notes here. There's a very long list, and I don't want to give you an incomplete list. The other part, there's a great deal. The other part of that answer to your question about why we have identified about 19 in terms of FDI going to be fallen behind those priorities is also because one of the other elements of this in every way that government can was vision. And we haven't really one of the main changes that we have made to our perspective investors and to immediately say what the Philippines want. That I came into office, I said, where are the areas? Do you want to go into electric vehicle manufacturing? Do you want to go into mining? Do you want to go into batteries? Do you want to what is it that the Philippines is going to spend money on? It becomes much easier. Where is the public expenditure going and why?
Mr. President,
once you are making that clear,
if I interject, right?
Please do. There will be investors who say, okay, we talk about structural changes.
You've made quite a number of them during the past 4 years of your administration, economic and reform policies. So what we need right now is consistency. That the next president, the next leaders of our country continue what you've already started. So what kind of leader? Who should we vote for in 2028? Who will continue what you've already started? What we really want is maybe you can give us a hint, Mr. President, of policies from one administration to another, because there is no consistency.
That's the life of the person who understands how to create jobs, who understands how
this type of policies
to create the inflation rate down.
And you have done a lot, Mr. President, in terms of green lanes, create more
and someone who thinks about productivity.
You've done
because
a lot
growth is about productivity. How do you make your working population more productive? How do you support them so they work better?
Coming to the country.
How do you fix the education system so they're better trained? How do you make sure that they're healthier? How do you make sure that they don't worry about food? Those are the kind of people that is why we have to be very, very actually are thinking about that people have to understand very, very well. I've always said very early on trying to do and what the benefits of what we are trying to do. I said when I was walking around in an entirely different arena. But the political stability is certainly something that is very, very important. So we need
to have nation builders. People
maybe
who
less
want to make
now,
the Philippines
but
better.
of course
People
in our
who actually
history,
love the Philippines
there
and
has
love
been that
Filipinos
element
and want to
of
make small
things
town
better.
politics. And
Where
it boils down to, it might sound a little,
you're
sentimental or
in this
emotional, but that's what you
town,
need.
you are,
And of course, there has to be an
running
element of competence.
to be mayor,
Love is not,
and
not
you're
it goes a long
campaigning
way, but
against,
it's not
let's say, the
enough.
incumbent
You also have to
or
know
whoever,
how
the
to
income.
do it. You have to have
Some training.
you're
Or
at the very least, you have to listen to
criticizing
people who have that
incumbents and say,
training.
what they're doing,
And
they
I'm
don't
proud
know
to say
what
we
they're
have
doing,
in government we have a thing called the private sector.
and
the
therefore,
private sector
by
advisory council.
necessity,
And the private sector advisory
then
council
they have
meet
to
more
say
or less
everything
once a week.
my opponent did
The
was
businessmen
wrong.
who are here
So
know that because
those
we see each
all
other
their
fairly often.
projects stop.
And they sit down
Stop.
and we
I
divide
have
it
a
up
better
into
idea.
different
I have a
elements.
better education to
It's
help
halfway
here,
done. The
jobs,
schoolroom is halfway
technology,
done. All you have to do is put a
and
roof
we
on
get
it.
the best of them.
Why don't
and
you
they sit
just
down,
do
and
that?
basically
Then
government
we'll have a
sits
new
there and listens.
schoolhouse. And what is it you
But
need
no,
from us?
that's
how it
and
started.
that has
Now,
filtered
it's
up
now
to even the
government.
national,
We
at the
on
national
this
level.
side of the table,
Where
our
whoever
they
went
come in
before
and they
me,
say, "Have you done your
who I
homework?"
oppose,
You know, we talked
and we
last
only
week.
have
The last meeting that we had,
presidents
we
only
say
get
that we're
one
going to do this.
term. So you
have
will
done it?
always be
Or haven't you?
opposing
And
the
why haven't you?
incumbent.
And what's the problem?
So you
And
have to show that everything that this person
there's a
did
great
in the
synergy
past
that
was-
comes from that.
was,
And it's not to blame and say
was wrong.
you're messing up.
And that you're
criticizing,
criticizing.
You're not
The
smart enough.
wonderful thing about
It's not
being in the
that.
opposition
It's about
is
you
you
don't
get and
actually
say,
have to
okay,
get
this
anything to work. Let's do that more.
All you have to do is criticize.
How do we make
All
it
you
better?
have to do
This
is
just didn't work.
pull
And then you have to decide, well, maybe it was just a bad
down.
idea. So let's do something else.
And that's
Let's
the
not waste our
problem
time.
that
Or
we face.
we have to do it. It's too
have
important.
to
We have to fix that problem.
Really, and that
has been
educate
so
people
helpful
in giving
what
us
we are
direction
trying to do.
on
I'm
how,
not here to
how I'm
government
not
should
president,
work.
you know,
because what we are trying to
I
attract
don't know,
is
to
business.
show off or
Of course, there's the social
whatever,
side to government,
help,
but the big side, we cannot
certain
afford the social
parts of
side
the
if we're not
economy
doing
or
well on the
friends
business
or
side, on the commercial,
relatives.
on
That's
the
not
private,
what I'm here for. I'm here to
on
do
the
these
revenue side.
structural
Let's just put it that way.
changes
There
so
are two
that the
sides to every balance
Philippines
sheet.
becomes
So we have to do well on both
more
sides, and that's
investment
what
friendly.
that's what the
And
PSAC, what it becomes.
we
called
are
the PSAC,
starting to
has
feel
become a very
the
important
effects of
part of
that,
it. But it all derives, it all
beneficial
filters down,
effects
distills
of that.
from that
And
very clear
then you are
understanding
able to say,
that the private sector
do you
needs
want
to be
to stop
a full
those
partner in
beneficial
economic
things?
So, Mr.
Because
President, this will just be a very short answer
we
that I'm
do not
expecting from you.
elect
So,
a
with the characteristics that you
president
mentioned for who should be the next president in 2028, have you already
all of
narrowed it
these
down to
will
about 2
just
or 3?
Go by the wayside. Now, one of the things we have tried to do to make it
certainly
make
there's-
that those systems more robust is to make them as widespread as possible. Number one.
Many of them actually.
Then I'm talking about
some of
things like
them-
education,
From the cabinet?
healthcare.
I'm sorry.
Are they from the cabinet?
social
Are they local
benefits.
officials?
Make
Are they
it
from the
so
Senate or Congress?
widespread
Just
that
like a
people
last line.
immediately feel the benefits.
As you can see,
and
Mr.
therefore,
President,
they
I
will
love your
refuse
socks.
Yeah,
It's
to
green.
allow
Because we're both
any
from Lacan,
future
but I'm wearing
leader to
these
stop
colors today.
those beneficial effects.
And but he was much
However,
older than I was.
when it comes to the economy, that is much more
Yes, but of
difficult.
course you have to.
Because how many economists are there? There's less than
You cannot limit yourself to
0.01%
government.
of the
But of course,
of
it's
the
much
populace
harder
are
to bring to a
economists who look
presidential
at the
level
number,
someone who has
who
not
look
been
at the
involved in
inflation
politics
rate,
ever.
who look
It
at the
happens,
core
but it's not
inflation,
that easy,
the
especially in the
inflation
highly
coming from
political
from
atmosphere
food
that we have
products,
here in the
inflation
Philippines.
coming from
It's
fuel,
not that they don't like the
and
person,
try
they
to
just know that they
analyze
don't know the
GDP
outcome.
growth,
And to build that up to a
the
presidential level
ratio
is quite difficult.
between
So you look at people in government and you see who's doing well,
debt
who is
and the
who is
GDP, all of
exceptional.
these things.
And we have-
Who looks
I'm
at that?
glad
No
to say,
one.
exceptional people
Very
in
few
government.
And you would endorse
Maybe
this
us,
person
people
very
in
soon?
this room.
Not soon.
Those are the people that look at.
So it's
timing is
harder to
everything.
explain.
We should be
And
talking
the
about
only
ASEAN
way
in the
really,
Philippines, not about politics.
shall we say,
So,
sell
okay, Mr. President, I mean, you've already instituted a lot of these
policies
economic
is
reforms.
to make people feel the
I mean,
effects
we've seen
of
the
those
economy grow
policies. And that
from
is
2022
the,
up until 2025.
short
Unfortunately,
of changing the
we saw
electoral
a
system.
setback, no?
But
In the
I
third
think
quarter,
those of
where we saw the
those of
economy
you who live here in
expand
the
by just
Philippines have
3.9%,
seen
and in the fourth
the
quarter by
difficulties that
3%.
arise
Is this
when
a concern for you?
the
And of course, this is
Constitution
also
is being
impacted by infrastructure
questioned
spending
and
because of the
there
flood
are suggestions to amend the
anomalies.
Constitution.
The flood control
And so
problem, scandal,
these
whatever
are
you
the
want to call it,
difficulties that we
has certainly
find.
played a very large part in
But
that.
as
And
long as we are
I-
able to show
Unfortunately, it had to
that
be done.
these
It is one
policies
of those things where
and
you
these
just have to
measures that
rip
we
the
have
Band-Aid off. There was
undertaken
no easy way to
are
do it.
of benefit, and we
otherwise,
can then people
then
will
the
say,
old
well, if
practices,
they are,
if it
I
wasn't
feel the
done,
benefit,
the old
my life
practices
is
will continue. And the
just
Philippines would flatten.
just that much better because of these things, then everyone else is exponential growth. That's the best way that you can do that. And so that's why way that we've tried to do it is to enshrine them in law. And that's much more difficult to change. So there are many people who some of these policies are enshrined. Create more, the one that you mentioned, create more, is the amendment that we have to the old Create Act, which is which was an act which was to provide incentives for investors, both on the plus side, incentives in actual tax breaks and things like that last year, and in sanctions for people who do not.
Amount of money
that we are spending
and we have first of all
we enlarged it. That's
climate change and to now do the adjustment to climate change, i.e. moving settlements away
because there are now more incentives
because there are industries that didn't exist when that law was written.
Climate change.
That now
when I was
very, very attractive.
I was governor from 98 to
everyone understands this.
When they said that the storm would come
mostly belong
we knew
in the digital
we knew where the
water,
where it was going to flood.
We knew what air gaze would be isolated. We knew what where to go. We had a very good idea of what was going to happen. That's no longer the case. Even if you look at the patterns of our weather, before it was very clear. It would come into Bicol, Region 5, and it would go up and come out. But it's a mix actually of incentives and also part.
That's no longer the case.
Mindanao has always been seen. There are no typhoons in Mindanao. There are. Maybe one or two only a year, but there are
the law
and so
also
that has been a really
circumscribes certain areas where,
not only
like
in
you
the
say,
fact
there's
that,
a green lane.
you can imagine how heartbreaking it is for someone who has worked very hard to build this bypass road, 5 kilometer
we specify certain areas where we are particularly interested, and we make it easier for investors to go into those areas.
Agriculture, again, that's the kind of thing that we have to be dealing with. So we have to be much smarter
mining,
when we do things. But that has been an impact as well.
And then many others. Actually, I made some notes here. There's a very long list, and I don't want to give you an incomplete list, but there is a great deal that we have
from both Russia and
identified.
So the prices of food
we have identified, I think, about 19 areas that are going to be the priority.
It was a seller's
those
market
priorities
because
the
supply coming out of those two countries
will
was quite
assist
large.
in
So
every way that
you have a
government
higher
can.
price, and these are
And
not only
again,
government, and then
one of the main
you would think
changes
they're
that
not
we have
producing
made
countries, so
is
really bother
to
our fuel
recognize
prices. But it did
and
anyway,
to immediately
because there was
say,
the
day
threats in
one,
the Strait of Hormuz.
that I came into office, I said we recognize the private sector
as a
that we are fighting with,
uncertainty about climate change, uncertainty about supply chains, uncertainty about the geopolitical concerns, about war, about peace. It's uncertainty that
other things
are much better
trying
than
to
government.
mitigate.
Once you
And we do
recognize
that
that
and you engage
like
them,
anything,
then
broadening
it
our
becomes
base,
much easier.
Again,
As a matter of fact,
talking to what we have come to describe
there's
as
a lot here. So
Yes, Mr.
so that
President.
talking is much less.
Mr. President, I hope you don't mind if I interrupt. Right?
Please do. Don't
Because-
get me started. We'll be here all day.
Okay, you talk about structural changes.
Impacted
You've made
GDP
quite
growth in the second half
a
of
number
next
of
year.
them.
I was talking to some
During
businessmen here, Mr. President,
4
one
years of
was a foreign investor, and he said, my concern is about the ease of doing business.
Yes.
And
So,
that you have
what we
answered.
need
And
right
the local
now
businessman that I
is
spoke to here told me, I'm
the
concerned
next,
about who's going to be jailed next.
president, the next
that's
leaders
perfectly
of
Will there be more people behind bars?
continue what you've already
Because we've been waiting for this, Mr. President, since last year.
What kind of leader? Who should we vote for in 2028 who will continue what you've already started? Maybe you can give us a hint, Mr.
Behind
President.
bars. But the system needs
Well,
to change.
number one, somebody who understands
That is why
economics.
we had to do that.
Because
I always say,
economics.
why
That's
is
the
it
first thing.
that Filipinos,
That's the
when they are
life of
abroad,
the person
do so
who
well?
understands how to
Because the
create
rules are
jobs,
clear.
who understands
how
you
work hard,
to
you get a little lucky,
how
you'll be
to
fine.
keep the inflation
I'll
rate down.
I'll tell you one of the
who
stories that
understands how
stuck
to
in my mind. I was
make
driving
food
along
supply
Camp John Hay when it was still under American
is
administration.
something that you
I was
can
literally driving
assume.
along. In front of me was a car
and
with a
someone
guy
who
was eating a
thinks
hamburger.
about productivity.
Okay, and he finished eating his
because
hamburger.
growth
And he-
is
and he
about
rolled up the
productivity. How
trash.
do you make your
And he put his hand outside the
population
window.
more
He
productive?
didn't let go of the
How
trash
do you
until he
support
left
them
the
so
gate
they work
of
better?
John Hay,
How
and
do
then
you
he threw the trash. Because he
how
could
do
do
you
it.
fix the
In John
education
Hay,
system so they're better trained?
basically,
How do you
would have
make
come
sure
running
that
after him
they're
and said, "You can't do that,
healthier?
you pay a
How
fine,
do you
and
make
we'll-
sure that they don't
we'll-
worry
we'll
about
pay for
food?
for your mistake."
Those are the kind
And
of
that's
people that
you have to make the
need
rules
that
clear.
we
You have
need.
to
Are
make-
the
you
people
cannot- and there
who
has to be
actually
sanctions.
are
When you
thinking
get it
about
wrong, or when you steal,
not politics,
or when you do
but
something
how
wrong,
to
abuse
make
your
the
power, abuse
country
your authority.
better.
You have to pay the
I've always
price.
said
And
very
that's
early
what
on
we have
again,
to
and
establish.
even
And
before
that
I
goes back
became
now
president.
to the strength
I always
of
was watching, and I
institutions.
said when I
And
was
that is the
walking
hardest
around
part
and
for a
being
young
around my
democracy like the
father,
Philippines to develop.
all
So we're going to see,
we
Mr.
would hear is
President,
we
more
are
incumbents
building a nation.
in jail
We are about
sooner rather than
nation
later.
building.
Well, you'll have to ask
I
the
didn't
you know, most
hear
of that
anymore.
now is are with the
So
Department
we
of Justice
need
and with
to
our
have
ombudsman. So I
nation
think they will have a
builders,
better idea of where
people
that's
who
going.
want to make
I'm
the
worried about so
Philippines
many other
better,
things right now. And
people who
I'm confident
actually
that the
love
DOJ
the
and the
Philippines
ombudsman
and
will do
love
what needs to be done.
Filipinos and want to
Focusing
make
now on
ASEAN, Mr. President.
The
Philippines is chair, and the theme is navigating our future. From your
a little
perspective,
sentimental
what
or
does
emotional, but that's what you
together
mean.
in terms
And
of
of course, there
practical economic
has to be
terms?
the right element of competency, the love, the understanding, and the commitment to goes a long way, but it's not enough. And that is very have to know how that we have to work. In many ways, we must some training. I think we share the aspiration. All member states share the aspiration. Who have ASEAN should return to its old role. I'm proud to say we have in government we have what happened in 2019. The private sector. We need to return to that. The private sector advisory council together does not mean that the private sector advisory council we all more or less have different conditions. We all are economically different. And the businessmen who are here know that. So we see the only thing that perhaps we have in common is that we're maritime countries. Sit down and we divide it up into different elements to education, joint and shared aspiration of returning to that role in the global community is something that we get the best of them together. And they sit down. Even achieving government will be done in many different ways, depending on which country. What is it you need from us? But we have to do it in consonance with one another. Now, so that we achieve our own national goals, and at the same time achieve the goals that we on this side of the table. And that needs that again we must work together. And that's why they come in and they say, "Have you done your homework?"
Mr. President, what concrete policy
the last week or the last meeting that we had, we were saying that we are going to do this. Have you done it, or haven't you? And why haven't you? And what's the problem? And it's a very there's a great synergy that comes around ASEAN. And it's not to blame. One of the great lessons that we had was to make more robust our supply chains. And that's we were going about. And we were our supply chains to our trade partners around the world. It's not about that. And with all the things that have getting together, and say, okay, the effort to make more supply chains more robust and stronger have really run into great obstacles. How do we make it better? And so there has been a joint understanding between member states, and then you have to decide. Well, maybe it was just a bad idea. So the supply chains within ASEAN, let's not waste our time. Or the way we do business with one another should be strengthened. We have to fix I came upon a statistic where that has been the business, the commerce, in giving us direction that ASEAN does is only 23%. I think that's the number, but 23% intra. Because what we are trying to attract the rest of the 77% is outside from ASEAN. Countries go outside of ASEAN. We cannot afford the social side if we're not doing well on the business side, on the commercial, and we're moving in the private. We talk now about the common grid, the common ASEAN grid. On the revenue side, we are slowly coordinating our different agencies so that, for example, procedures for importation is pretty much standardized. That we understand how each country does business and how to deal with them. But it all derives what the laws are, and we understand what part that each country will play. Very clear understanding what we aspire for. The private sector needs to be a global force in economic development.
So, Mr. President, this will just be a very short answer that I'm expecting from you. So, with the characteristics that you mentioned,
we would like to thank you
who should be the next president in 2020.
Wow,
have you already narrowed it down to about 2 or 3?
He answered every question without fail.
You're going to get me into trouble.